Welcome to the Midwest.motogirl podcast, where we'll dive into all aspects of building a badass life around motorcycles, mindset, and overall female betterment. Get ready to explore how your mindset can make or break your experience and enjoyment in the male-dominated world of motorcycles. Welcome back to the Midwest.motogirl podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Gard. I just got home from the racetrack. I was out at Motorsports Park Hastings in Hastings, Nebraska, Friday night and all day Saturday. I came home this morning, just got home, and it was the first track day of the season with Track Addicts, and that's the track day organization that puts on the events out at Motorsport Park Hastings for motorcycles. And so as I was driving home from the racetrack, I was kind of thinking about how the weekend went. And then I started listening to a podcast from another motorcycle rider who actually did an interview with Ken Hill. And if you're not familiar with who Ken Hill is, he is a championship motorcycle racer. He started racing kind of late in his career. He didn't start riding motorcycles until he was in his 30s, and he didn't start winning championships until he was in his 40s, which is pretty late in the game compared to when a lot of people are racing and winning championships in the motorcycle racing world. But he has a whole bunch of coaching information out there. He does a podcast. He has what he calls his Substack, which is an app with coaching tips in it. He does YouTube videos. He has like a master class, which is like an in-person riding school. But anyways, so he has tons and tons of information out there about motorcycle riding, motorcycle racing, the fundamentals of motorcycle racing, lots of tips and tricks and all kinds of things. But he has spent kind of his whole motorcycle career learning how to teach people to be better riders and learning how to communicate effectively with the people that are just starting out and with the people that are like the top of their game. But anyways, so I'm listening to this podcast and he's talking about motorcycling is a sport and motorcycle racing is a sport. And people need to treat it like it's a sport where you go at it with the discipline to learn the fundamentals and the discipline to practice. And one of the points that he touched on was that unlike volleyball or basketball or running or something like that, where you can do it in all of these different places and there's like lots of resources out there to get into those sports and availability, with motorcycle racing and track days, the availability isn't there. Track time is limited. Track time is expensive. And so when you're out there on the track, you should be actively working on something, working on the fundamentals, improving your skills. And when you're off the track, there are other things that you can be doing to practice those skills, but you have to have like this determination and this kind of like mindset that you're going to actively practice and be disciplined about practicing, whether you're at the racetrack or whether you're at home. And if you're at home, you can be practicing in a parking lot or a street. You can be reading or watching videos, trying to like learn more about different techniques and the fundamentals. You can also just sit on your bike in the garage and practice body positioning until you get that kind of muscle memory of where you should be at on the bike coming out of a corner or going into a corner. And so he was just talking about like the discipline that it takes to learn a sport, and that motorcycle racing should be treated the same way. But unfortunately, it really hasn't been, just because the availability is not there. And as I was thinking about that, it kind of clicked in my head. I was like, wow, I have been treating motorcycle racing as a hobby, not as a sport where you have to learn it and be disciplined in it. And I grew up around motorcycles. So I think there was a lot of just assumptions that because I had grew up around motorcycles and I knew how to work on them, that I also knew how to ride them. And one of my takeaways from this weekend was that I kind of realized there's a whole lot of fundamentals to track day riding and to racing that I still don't know, or not necessarily don't know, but I'm not good at executing. One of the things that I was noticing while I was riding over the weekend was that going through a corner, I'm not looking through the corner, I'm looking at the corner. So at Hastings, there's 13 corners. And the way that the track is set up, turn one and turn four are basically opposites of each other. They're both 90-degree corners. They're both at the end of a straightaway. The two straightaways are pretty much the exact same length, and but one is a right and one is a left. So turn one is a left, and there's some kind of armco there. So if you enter that corner early, you can't see through it. However, if you enter that corner a lot later and you just kind of like throw it in and actually make it a 90, you can see the exit of that corner a lot easier. But I struggle a lot with turns 1 and turns 4. And now 4, there's no armco, there's no barricade. Like you can see all the way through that corner. And when I'm coming up to those 2 corners, I see the brake markers. And when I see that 5 brake marker, instantly in my head, I go, oh gosh, there's a corner coming up. And it's not necessarily that I'm panicking, but that 5 board in my head makes me think that I need to immediately be downshifting and getting on the brakes. And so I'm scrubbing way more speed than what I need to be. And then I'm going a lot slower into that corner than what I'm capable of or what I could be going. And then I'm ending up like missing my apex, entering too early because I've slowed down so much already that I'm like, oh, well, I've slowed down this much. I guess it's time to turn. And that's kind of like where I really realized, like, okay, you're not looking through the corner, you're looking at the corner. And I kind of had this realization last year, but it's been wintertime in Nebraska, so I haven't been riding motorcycles lately. I haven't honestly really been thinking about them other than working on this podcast and some of the maintenance that I've been doing in the garage. But I guess my expectation going into the track day weekend was that I was just going to be 10 times better than what I ended up last year, even though I haven't practiced all winter long. And basically, I started out the season with lap times very similar to where I ended last year. My fastest lap yesterday was almost exactly what my fastest lap was at the last track day back in September. It's a few seconds off my fastest lap ever at Hastings, but it's kind of like right on par with where I've been since I changed to this Yamaha R3. I kind of had it in my mind, like I got new bodywork, I got new paint. We did all of these like little small upgrades with like new brake rotors, new chain and sprocket, different set of wheels, that my bike looks like a brand new bike. And so I guess in my head, I was kind of thinking like, oh, I have this brand new bike, and it's really not. It's just like a lot of cosmetic things. But I'm thinking in my head, like I have this brand new bike. I'm just gonna go out there and instantly pick it up, and I'm gonna be faster, and this is gonna be great. And as I was talking with one of my girlfriends at the track yesterday morning, we were talking about how things were going, and an instructor came up and he actually complimented me. He's like, it looked like you were getting around really good. Like, are you feeling good today? I was like, yeah, like it felt great. The bike feels great. And he was like, yeah, you looked really good out there and your lines looked good. And so then we were kind of talking, and I started like asking a few questions, like getting some clarifications on like what are the passing rules in our group with some of the newer riders. And so at Track Addicts, if you are a new rider, you don't have a lot of track experience, or you've just never been to that track in general, they have a track day school that all new riders are required to take. And they do it for safety reasons. It's like an alternating between classroom setting and then track riding. And during the track day riding, there's like orientation laps where you're going to follow an instructor. They're going to show you the race lines. As the day goes on, they're going to pick up speed if you're feeling comfortable. But they do it for safety primarily, and because they don't want it just to be a giant crash fest and people being all over the place. When the track day school comes out onto the track, they ride in the same group that I ride in. And so they've always said for years, hey, with the track day school, don't pass them in the corners, only pass them on the straightaways. Everybody else, you can outside passing only in our group rather than inside and outside. Basically, they just don't want you to stuff somebody on the inside because it is a track day. And the group I ride in is not the fastest group. It's like kind of like the novice and intermediate group combined together. And so I got some clarification on that from one of the instructors that I was talking to, because I remember that's what the rule had always been, but I had been seeing people pass the school students on the outside. So I was like, well, maybe the rule changed. And he said, no, you are supposed to only pass on the straightaways for the new school students. And then as we continued talking, trail braking came up, and he mentioned something about trail braking, and I was like, I don't know how to trail brake. I've never trail braked before. Literally, like when I'm riding, I'm on the track, I'm on the gas, I'm coming up to the brake markers and the brake indicators before a corner, and I'm getting off the gas. I'm downshifting, getting on the brakes pretty hard, and then I'm coasting. Before I even go into the corner, I am basically off the brakes and I'm coasting into that corner, and then I hit the apex and I'm getting back on the gas. And he was like, no, no. And so he was kind of showing me on his pit bike, like, this is kind of how that motion would be. And he was like, just practice that. Sit on your bike and practice that motion. And he was like, then take your pit bike and go to a parking lot and practice that in a parking lot. He was like, you don't have to do that on the track. And so that was one of the moments where I was like, yeah, there's a lot of things that I probably still need to learn. And with turns 1 and 4, I was noticing, like, I'm looking at the corner and I'm looking at the brake markers. I see those brake markers and then I'm fixating on that corner instead of looking at the corner, finding my apex, and then looking through it. So turn 1 is it's a 90-degree left-hand corner. And then turn 2 is like a big 180-degree right-hand corner. And it's kind of banked and it like kind of curves and goes downhill a little bit. And turn 2, for a long time, was very difficult for me because there used to be a big crack right through the center of turn 2, and the race line through turn 2, you started on the outside of that crack, and then you would cross over the crack, and then you would hit your apex on the inside of the corner. And over the years, they had filled that crack with tar. And so in my head, I would see that tar strip and immediately think that like the tar strip was going to like suck my wheel in or something. And then I was going to lose traction. And like, I didn't like the way that it felt when I went over that tar strip. So I just didn't do it. And so I was either inside for the whole corner or I was outside for the whole corner. And it was a terrible line to be on. And since the repave a couple of years ago, that crack no longer exists. There's some other patches and cracking and stuff in turn 2 now from cars being out there. But I'm not worried about turn 2. But they did grind down a spot near the apex of the corner where they had gotten some pretty big bumps, like braking bumps from cars being out there. And so you can physically see that grinding spot or that spot where they've ground down the asphalt. And so as I'm riding yesterday, I'm going into the corner and I'm seeing the corner, I'm seeing my lines, I'm seeing the apex, I'm seeing that spot where the asphalt has been ground down. And then once I see that spot where the asphalt's ground down, I'm continuing to look at the track. And as the day went on, I was like, Sydney, look up. And I started telling myself to like look up and look out, because as soon as you get to that point where I could see the apex, I know that that's where I should have been rolling on the throttle, but my eyes weren't looking up and looking down the straightaway. So I was just kind of like maintenancing throttle until my bike was upright again. And so I know I'm losing a lot of time coming out of turn 2. I'm losing a ton of time going into corners 1 and 4, but I just could not figure out like how to kind of get over some of that. And as far as like where my eyes were looking, that was like another big indicator to me where it's like, okay, you don't have the fundamentals of where your vision should be at. You have not mastered that skill. And if you want to get faster as a rider, that's where you need to master your skill. Or that was kind of one of the things that I've been telling myself and reflecting on as I've been thinking about the weekend. But overall, it was a very good weekend. It was a lot of fun. The community out in Hastings is wonderful. The whole Track Addicts community is great. There's a group from Iowa and Kansas that I've really clicked with the last couple of years. And so it's just like a lot of fun and camaraderie. We chit chat between sessions. We make a lot of jokes. We make fun of each other. We laugh a lot. In the evening, there's a social hour. So we'll all just kind of like hang out and have social hour. Usually somebody puts on MotoGP towards the end of the night and we'll watch whatever MotoGP race is going on. So that was all a lot of fun. The weather was not ideal. We were expecting like 65 degrees. Yesterday, it stayed cloudy all day. I don't think it hit 60 degrees. It was pretty windy and like the wind was coming out of the east and it was just cold. It kind of had like a really cold bite to it. So I felt like most of the weekend when I was out there, I was just cold. But overall, it was a very good weekend and a good time. And the biggest realization that I had is that I need to start treating motorcycle racing as a sport rather than a hobby, and have the discipline and put in the work to practice the fundamentals and master those fundamentals if I want to get faster. And so one of the other things that Ken Hill was talking about in this interview on the podcast was he breaks down motorcycle racing into like 3 fitness categories. So you have your fundamentals fitness, which is kind of like how good you are at mastering the fundamentals of riding a motorcycle. Then you had your physical fitness. So like if you don't have the endurance to ride for 20 or 30 minutes, well, you may struggle in that area. And then 3 was the mental fitness aspect of it. And he was talking about that you have to have all 3 of those and be pretty good at all 3 of those to be a good motorcycle racer. And I started thinking about it, and I have the physical fitness part of it down, and I have the mental fitness part of it down, where I'm pretty much always able to find a bright spot or something to be positive about with any sort of track riding or race weekend experience. But the fundamentals part I'm lacking in. And so as far as like the mental part of it goes, as he said that, where he's talking about like the mental aspect of it and the mental fitness, where if you're just down on yourself and you don't have the right attitude and you don't feel like you can do it, like you're not going to succeed. But like if you're confident in your abilities and you're positive about it, like that's going to help you a lot. At Track Addicts, they have an amateur race series throughout the season. So at the end of every track day, there is a motorcycle race at the end of the day, and they have 2 classes. They have a lightweight race and they have a superbike race. And the lightweight race is all motorcycles 450cc and below are eligible for the most part. Like they have, I believe, like the new Ninja ZX4RR. They don't allow that to be in the lightweight class because it makes significantly more horsepower than all the other bikes in that class. But you could have like a Ninja 250. I ride a Yamaha R3, which is 320cc. There's Ninja 400s in there. And so there is a little bit of like variation with horsepower within the group. But it's not like an unsafe type of horsepower difference or like any kind of like unfair advantage really. And so I went out for the race last night. I did the lightweight race, and I was thinking that I had a pretty bad start, but my friend took a video of it and sent it to me. So I watched the start video this morning, and I was like, oh, I actually had a better start than what I thought that I did, which made me feel better about the race. At the end of the race, I wasn't disappointed, but I started in like on the front row of the amateur lightweight class. There was 7 people signed up for the race. Only 6 made it to grid. I ended up finishing 6th. And so I went back a lot of places. And basically after turn 1, I didn't see anybody else for the rest of the race. I was kind of just riding out there by myself. And a lot of the other people in my class were on 400s. So they do make more horsepower than I do. After turns 1 and turns 2, you've got 2 long straightaways. So it is kind of easy to fall around away from the pack. And then I have to make up the time on the infield. And unfortunately, those riders were just putting down fast enough laps yesterday that I couldn't make up the time on the infield after they got away from me on the straightaways. So I finished last. Wasn't too upset about that. I kind of knew that would be the outside outcome of the race based on what the grid was, what they were riding, etc. But I got lapped. And before we went out for the race, I said that my goal was to not get lapped. Pretty much every Track Addicts race that I've done to date, I think this was my 4th Track Addicts race, I've been lapped. And so yesterday I got lapped on, I believe, lap 6 of 8, which is actually a pretty decent. I remember I think my first Track Addicts race, I got lapped on like lap 4. And I got lapped by everybody, not just some of the expert riders. And so yes, I got lapped on lap 6. So I made it quite a ways. And the way that it happened, there was a group of 6 riders in the expert class. They have amateur and expert, and we were both on the track at the same time. It's part of the lightweight race. But in the expert class, there were 6 people battling for the top 3 spots. And so the person in position 1, he caught me at going into turn 1 at the end of the straightaway. And so everybody watching the race, they're kind of seeing this whole thing set up, and they're like, oh gosh, this is going to be bad. They're going to catch her in turn one, and this is going to just be really bad. The first person in the pack, he caught me going into turn one, and he went up the inside, and it was very, very clean pass. I had lots of space between him and I. And basically, I saw his red bike go by, and I was like, whoa, he's moving. And then as I'm entering turn two, the second and third place positions went around me, and they just split me. One went on the outside, one on the inside, and they were moving. And the one guy passed me a lot closer than kind of what I was expecting, but I guess it didn't really scare me or make me nervous. I've ridden with him a lot before, and he's an aggressive rider, and he's pretty fast. So I'm like, okay, like, all right, there's more bikes coming, like those three, like they're battling. And then kind of in the middle of turn two and on the exit of turn two, then I got passed by three more bikes, and it was the same thing where they kind of split me. Two went on one side, one went on the other. And there's just the whole pack of them just hauling the mail down the straightaway away from me. And so after the race was over, I came back and everybody's clapping and cheering. And I was just like, well, I got lapped and I finished last. Like, it is what it is. Like, I'm not happy, but I'm not disappointed either. It's kind of the outcome I expected. And everybody was like, you did such a good job holding your line when you got lapped. When all those guys went around you, you just stayed there. And a couple people made jokes about how like I was probably like ready to poop my pants and scared because they had passed me that close. And I told the one guy, I was like, no, that didn't make me nervous at all. I was like, I'm way more nervous going into corner one or corner four on a wide open track when it's just me than I am getting passed like that. And they're like, well, that's so strange. But they were giving me kudos for holding my line, and I've gotten that feedback before that I'm really good at holding my line. And so that was kind of like my bright spot for the weekend, where I felt pretty good about it. Like, hey, these guys are a lot faster than me, and they're complimenting me that when we're in a racing situation and they come up behind me, they know where I'm going to be at on the track because my lines are really consistent, and they know that when they start to go around me, they can trust that I'm just going to stay exactly where I'm at, and I'm not going to get scared. I'm not going to chop the throttle. I'm not going to lock up the brakes or like make some like evasive maneuver or anything like that to try and ride defensively. And I say that in quotations. They just trust that I'm going to stay right where I'm at. And they were telling me how much they appreciate that, which was kind of like the bright spot that I was focusing on. And then in the superbike race, the superbike race is typically 600s and 1000cc motorcycles together. They did have a 400cc bike in the superbike race yesterday. It was somebody on a Ninja 400RR. They said, no, the 400RR needs to be in the superbike class. And so he was a newer rider. I think that was his first race yesterday. He went out in the superbike race, and he was kind of in the same position that I was, where at the start of the race, everybody rode away from him, and he was just kind of out there riding around by himself. But when I looked at lap times at the end of the race, it made me feel pretty good, because he's on a bike that makes probably double the horsepower that mine does. My R3 makes about 38 horsepower. It's very stock. And so probably double the horsepower, and we had the same lap times in the race and kind of throughout the day in general. So I was like, well, that's something else that I can focus on, that even though I didn't just jump on my motorcycle yesterday and be like put down a new personal best lap, I felt like it was a good weekend. I picked up where I left off, and I was able to find some positivity in realizing that I don't know the fundamentals, and some positivity in the race where I'm getting lapped and I'm riding around by myself. But overall, it was a good experience. I tried recording this podcast while I was driving home, and the quality of the sound was just so terrible that I thought, well, I should probably just re-record this. And so here I am. But in 2 weeks, I will be back on the road, back at a race weekend. I'm heading up to Brainerd International Raceway in Brainerd, Minnesota, to do a full-on race weekend with Central Road Racing Association. A lot of my fellow racers from Track Addicts are going to go up there as well. And so we should have a really good weekend. I'll have to do an episode about that race weekend as a recap as well. One of the things that did come up when we were just kind of like having social hour last night after the track day, I found out that a lot of my followers and subscribers to this podcast are from Track Addicts. And it was really fun and kind of cool to hear that like these people are actually interested in what I'm talking about or what I had to say. And the one guy, as we were talking about it, he asked if they could submit questions and me do a question and answer type of podcast episode. And I said, yeah, absolutely. So keep that in the back of your mind as we get farther into motorcycle season. I may do one or multiple Q&A episodes. So if you have any questions that you wanted to ask me about motorcycles or racing or anything like that, feel free to leave it in the comment section of this episode. I'll be working on compiling some of those questions over the next few weeks to do a Q&A podcast episode. So again, thank you for joining me. It was a really great weekend, and I'm looking forward to the next race weekend coming up here soon. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and follow. Share it with your friends. If you've got any recommendations of new episodes, I'm all ears. I would love to hear what your thoughts are about the podcast, about different topics that you want to hear about. And I look forward to the rest of the season coming up. So again, thank you for joining me, and we'll talk to you guys soon.